You're listening to Let's Talk Sustainable Business.
Hello, my name is Uwe Schulte, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this podcast in our series Let's Talk Sustainable Business. It's brought to you by the Conference Board Global Sustainability Center. Today, I will be talking to Joao Paulo Ferreira, the CEO of Natura in Latin America, about purpose-driven companies. Before we get started, as we are recording this podcast during the COVID-19 crisis, we would like to express our solidarity with all suffering in this crisis and express our gratitude to all supporting those in need. So, first let me introduce our guest to you. Joao Paulo graduated in the electrical engineering from the University of Sao Paulo, USP, and has an executive MBA from the University of Michigan in the United States. He worked at Unilever for 20 years. Joao Paulo is the CEO of Latin America for Natura and Company. Previously CEO of Natura, joined the business in 2009 as VP of Operations and Logistics. Welcome, Joao Paulo. I'm so pleased to have you, and please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in Natura.
Thank you very much, Uwe. For those listening to us, Uwe is an old friend. We worked together many years ago, and I enjoy the fact that you are taking this cause forward, Uwe. I think you told a lot about myself. I can only add that I'm married to Elizabeth. We've been married now for 27 years. I have a 16-year-old son who enjoys playing his guitar, and he plays very well. Actually, I used to play with him, but I can't catch up with him anymore. So nowadays, one of my pleasures is to listen to him playing. I joined Natura 10 years ago, as you said, and there's a place that I found a new way of doing business. I mean, sort of breaking this sort of paradox that it's impossible to reconcile economic progress with social development and environmental protection. And so I'm very glad to share some of my experiences with you guys today.
Great, thanks. As we have a global audience, and there might be some listeners, as much as I almost doubt it, who don't know Natura. So could you just briefly talk about the history of Natura and the scope of this business today?
Sure. So Natura is a Brazilian-born cosmetics company which celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. It developed its business primarily across Latin America until 2012, when it started to bring other companies to its family. So by the end of 2012, the Australian-born Aesop joined our family. It's a more luxury cosmetics retailer. And that's when we started to learn how to manage other businesses and other brands in the company. Then late in 2017, so exactly 3 years ago, the Body Shop joined our group. And that's actually when we formally became a group. So Natura sort of evolved into Natura & Co., which encompasses more than one company. So at that point, 3 companies, Natura, Aesop, and the Body Shop. And now, most recently, beginning of this year, 2020, we welcomed Avon into the family. So we are now 4 businesses with 4 iconic brands, which turned us into one of the largest cosmetics company in the world, actually one of the top 5. And it's been an exciting journey, I have to say. And interesting enough, when we decided we would expand, bringing other companies and brands into the family, might be worth mentioning that we had to develop a filter, and that filter was to do with purpose, Uwe.
That is very interesting. I'll come back to that in a second. But before, I find it fascinating to see that Natura has a special way of bringing the product to the end user. And when I look at your recent joint Avon, there seems to be like a circle coming around.
Oh, indeed. Interesting that you noticed that. So Natura was born in 69, and in 74, it chose direct selling as its main sales and distribution method, so to say. And that had a lot to do with the company's vision for social and development as well. I mean, Natura was born out of two passions: cosmetics and relationships, and the belief that combined they have the power of transforming individuals and everything around them, their families, communities, society, country, and ultimately the planet. So direct selling was the logical mechanism for that to come true, which developed Natura into this more than 2 million consultants network of affection, as we keep saying. Of course, that we were inspired in the company that created that industry, and that was Avon, 136 years ago, precisely. And so we were so delighted that at the end of our 50 years journey, Natura's 50 years journey, we could meet the origin of our industry, Avon, to join forces in this quest for developing, for generating positive impact on society. And altogether now, we are more than 6 million representatives and consultants around the world, with 40,000 associates working in more than 100 countries, which shows the power of mobilizing that sort of army of people around the causes that we stand for.
That in itself is extremely fascinating. I'm almost tempted to dive more into it, but you already mentioned the word purpose, and we hear this increasingly. And when you look it up, the definition of purpose is the reason for which something exists. You actually, in your wording, don't use the word purpose. You say since 1969, Natura's reason for being has been to create and sell products and services that promote the harmonious relationship of the individual with oneself, with others, and with nature.
Yeah.
I must say, I would call that a purpose, and I would love to know from you, in your vision, what that actually means today.
All right. So indeed, it took a few years to be able to formalize those words you just quoted, and it's actually a combination of the reason for being, the vision, and the beliefs, right? And that defines the whole business model, the way people operate, the way our processes are built. One of the interesting elements of having a reason for being is that if we are not fulfilling that reason, we should not exist. I find this is really fascinating, and we keep checking on that. Are we doing this? Because if we're not doing this, it's not something that we are pursuing, right? It's something that we have to do. So if we're not doing that, we should not exist as a company. And so it took a few years to be able to formalize that idea that we believe that through cosmetics and relationships, we have that power you just mentioned of promoting self-esteem, self-awareness, from which empathy is born so that each individual is able to relate to the external world, their family, society, the planet, and so on. And the beliefs, which are six, also help us bringing people together, because it's relatively easy to check if you have similar beliefs or not. So there are six beliefs: interdependence, continuous improvement, the search for beauty, uh, commitment to truth, diversity, and sustainability. And either you believe in those things or you don't. And if you don't, I mean, you shouldn't work in this environment. And anyway, so those things eventually translate into our working processes and the metrics associated to those working processes. And that's what make this alive, rather than words standing on the wall, right? So let me give you an example. When one of our beliefs mentions commitment to truth, that is the reason why we don't have an anti-aging product in our product line. Simply because we cannot fight against aging. We can fight against the signs of aging, but not against aging. Actually, time is the raw material of life. Why should we fight against it? So that is one. Now, for those things to eventually translate into a product line or to the metrics in the distribution system, for instance, that takes many years of continuous improvement. But that's what makes, let's say, the purpose or the reason for being alive.
That is really fascinating, because what you've just told me, that certain trends which look attractive and could create some sales volume, but they are deep down not truthful, your purpose will help you to say, we're not going to take that opportunity because it's not part of what we believe in. Did I hear that right?
You're right, Uwe. Of course, that's a difficult call many times. Sometimes it's difficult even to spot that you're facing dilemmas. But that's what we try and do. And so we we intend to deliver social, economic, environmental results, right? So all of our executives are awarded based on those elements. So every day we have to take decisions where we have to weigh economic development, social impacts, and environmental protection every day. So can we develop a new lipstick? Yeah, sure. Does it have to perform nicely on your mouth? Yes. Is it reducing carbon footprint? No. So it's not ready. We're not going to launch. and, and and say, oh my God, we have to wait a little bit more. Yes, we do have to wait a little bit more. So, but and these are difficult calls, but that's what happened when you're on the edge of trying to balance different variables and optimizing for the entire system every day. And sometimes people
Yeah.
don't even realize that is going on. So think about some of our professionals in distribution. Uh, they may not relate back to all this the reason for being of the company, but embedded into their decision making process is a variable whereby, like let's say, carbon emissions. So they have to judge whether they're going to deliver faster, cheaper, or lower carbon emissions every day. So they'll have to choose whether they're going to ship by bike or by boat or by truck, you name it. So imagine that embedded in all processes of the company. There's a lot of room to improve that. There's science, social, environmental science that continues to be developed for us to improve those things. But as it keeps evolving, gets into the routine of our teams, that's what makes this reason for being alive.
But what you're telling me is that wherever you are within your organization, one of the challenges everybody is facing to apply the purpose in decision making.
Oh yes, absolutely. So that has been deployed in many sub processes of the company over the years, uh, and everyone is appraised and rewarded based on the combination of those elements.
Let me dive a little bit deeper because I'm sort of trying to really understand. You're saying life is a chain of relationships. Everything is interdependent. Valuing relationships is the foundation of the great human revolution. Uh, how does that apply to a business like yours?
Well, that's the very nature of our business, right? So we have this 6 million with Avon, 6 million in independent representatives or consultants, which are basically developing relationships with their customers. And it's not a one time transaction, it has to build trust over time. And trust is not about recommending the best product for you at that particular moment. Of course, that is a critical element of our business. But it's also about understanding your emotional needs, trying to convey some of the philosophical goals of this community, and trying to engage people in activities with higher purposes. And so, and of course, that through that, there's more value to be captured and distributed amongst participants, right? Including
Yeah.
including material value. And that is fair. I mean, there's material value, but there's emotional and philosophical value. So that you know, we translate our reason for being in the value proposition to our network of consultants is based on three P's, as we say, right? It's purpose, prosperity, and belonging, which in Portuguese starts with the letter P, right? It is so. This is all what they do is prosperity, both material and social. Uh, is belonging because the network supports itself in so many different ways, not only teaching each other how to act as a consultant, but also helping them with family matters, emotional support, and so on and so forth. Right? And finally, purpose, because many of our consultants are social entrepreneurs. It's unbelievable, but they're community leaders, social entrepreneurs, a large number of them. And what happens is that both the company centrally or other people in the network will engage into their social projects to develop their smaller communities. So that's how this chain of relationships build over time to increase the value of the ecosystem as a whole.
Hmm. Now, let me challenge you a little bit
Sure.
here, because it's easy when everything is smooth sailing and company is growing and all of that, to talk about purpose. But when you hit a crisis, then it becomes, of course, so much more difficult. And we're unfortunately experiencing that awful crisis of COVID-19. How have you dealt with that in the light of your reason for being?
Excellent question, Uwe. And I have to tell you that we had no doubt on the way we would react. And that was because of our reason for being. So we decided we would do three things: help trying to contain the spread of the disease, look after our people and try and make the economy, keep the economy active. So, very first days, what we did was to stop our factories and redirect all the available capacity to essential items, soaps and alcohol, concentrated alcohol, and so on, which was not part of our portfolio, by the way. And
But for disinfecting products, yeah.
yes, and to donate everything that we could. So first hour is what is it that we can donate? So we donated a huge volume of products across Latin America to health authorities, NGOs, health professionals, and so on and so forth. Right. And by the way, interesting enough is that we had to collaborate with alcohol producers, sugarcane producers, that also donated the alcohol, so that we could convert those things. Because otherwise we wouldn't be able to source all of these things in such a short period. So it was a beautiful way of having people collaborating to try and help the society. So that's the first thing we did. Then we sent everyone else home. We announced job security for at least 60 days because people were really scared, right? Then we started looking out at our consultants. So we extended all their payment terms so that they wouldn't have to worry with that. And imagine the impact on the cash of the company for doing that.
Yeah.
But we had no doubt. I mean, we're going to look. We're going to deal with that later. But right now, is let them rest with one problem less. We created an emergency fund for our consultants in the most vulnerable ones, including, unfortunately, funeral support, right, where needed. And finally, we accelerated many of our digitalization solutions so that many of those consultants who lost their jobs would be able to keep in contact with their clients and get some minimum income to get some food on their table and provide for their families. And by the way, we increased their commissions on that form of commercialization, so that they will keep the same sort of profit they used to. So that was that painful? Yes, of course. Did that impact on our cash? Yes. And then profitability? Yes, sure. But that was the right thing to do. Now, there's the interesting thing, Uwe. Guess what happened to the satisfaction KPIs or loyalty KPIs that we tracked amongst our network of consultants? It went through the roof, because that is the thing that they would expect us to do. So again, we are building long-term relationships. So we are together for the long run. So they're returning that to us. We looked after them, and in return, they're looking after us. And right now, our share of their minds, of their hearts, and of their business has increased significantly, simply because they decided they would return to us what we did to them in the first hours.
Now this is very encouraging, because what you're saying is, for example, that word prosperity, which you've just used in the company purpose, you've applied that as a reason for decisions when you decided to do what you've just described. And it sounds like it has been not just an emotional and socially correct decision, but whilst you were losing in the height of the crisis cash flow and profits, it seems to be building your business for the long run.
Absolutely, Uwe. You know, a few years ago, we had to re-examine our business, Natura business, which was not performing well in our home country here in Brazil. It faced some difficulties, say around between 2014 and 16. And the reason we were facing difficulties is because we were not really delivering according to our reason for being. So the relationships had become more transactional rather than based on lifetime value and true willingness to develop all the potential of all the participants. And that translated in our commercial rules, in our offerings, and so on. We started to lose both consumer and consultants' preference because then we were similar to other companies. And we had to go back to our reason for being, check whether our practices were in line with them. And we had derailed a little bit. We had then to redesign many of our commercial practices, the offerings of some of our brands, and to get back to the framework that our principles define, our reason for being defines. And when we did that, we relaunched our operating model and our commercial model with extreme success. And that's when the business resumed growth, resumed its health in all angles you can look at. And that's when we decided to expand again, bringing the Body Shop first and most recently Avon. So we had to go back to that essence and check whether our practices were in line with that. Because when we lost it, the business suffered.
That is an interesting observation, because it means that it's a constant process to re-evaluate how you develop vis-a-vis your purpose. It's lovely that we were able to talk about this and how you apply it, and I would have loved on many points to dive a little bit deeper, but what's especially interesting is to see how you turn this into concrete actions around sustainability. And we haven't got the time today to do that, but I'm looking forward in our next podcast to continue the conversation with you to talk about exactly that.
Sure, Uwe, whenever you want. Great to be with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joao Paulo, for this very interesting conversation and shedding some light on what purpose driven means in action. So to our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to our podcast series or explore the entire catalog of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcast. And we would really appreciate your feedback on these podcasts and suggestions of what you would like to hear about and whom you would like to listen to. So please write to us at to sustainability@tcb.org. We would love to receive your messages. Thank you very much for today. And next week we will speak to Joao Paulo again about their sustainability in action. Thank you.
That was Let's Talk Sustainable Business.